Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm coming out of recess. And public testimony is over, and we will be moving on to communications or the order of resolutions. I feel it incumbent upon ourselves to, if it's okay with the rest of the council, to take Resolution 249 out of order. That's okay? Okay. Mr. Clerk, Resolution 249.
Resolution 249-15 proposes an amendment to the County of Hawaii General Plan in accordance with the General Plan Comprehensive Review process relating to geothermal resources development. Proposes the following amendments to the General Plan. 1. The relevant Hawaii County Planning Commission should have the authority to regulate future geothermal development in Hawaii County subject to state law. 2. Additional development of geothermal resources should mitigate impacts to people by the use of best available control technology. And 3. Additional development of geothermal resources that are not part of the previously approved Geothermal Resource Permit 2 production facilities should avoid urban areas zoned for residential use. Introduced by Mr. Iligan.
Mr. Iligan. I hope I said Mr. Iligan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was good. I move to approve Resolution 249-15.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Iligan, seconded by Ms. Willie. First off, I'd like to give the floor to Ms. David.
Mahalo, Chair Kanuha, and mahalo, Mr. Iligan. I asked to speak before we get started, as listening to all the testimony, listening to our people speak of culture and how this would be wrong culturally. I agree with that. I really do. And I honor all your heartfelt testimony. What I would like to address at this point is the testimony by Mr. Victor. And I agree with everything that you said, Mr. Victor, when you speak of aloha. And what my kupuna has taught me, that when you bear gifts, it is disrespectful to refuse. And I really believe in that. I believe that aloha goes both ways. And so, in all respect to my kupuna, and not disrespecting what they taught me, I must entertain, on their behalf, your offer to drink that water. So, Clerk, can you please? I'm doing this for my ancestors, because I believe that when we speak culture, we just don't speak it. And it goes both ways. You treat people the way you want to be treated, and I respect that. I've been taught that. And so now, for our kupuna, I will drink your water.
Council Chair, can I point of information?
Please state your point.
Yeah. And with no disrespect to the culture, but I'm on several types of medication, I don't know what I'm going to be drinking, so it's not no disrespect. But I welcome all of you guys to partake of this water as well. But I'm serious about being on medication, and I'm not gonna.
Thank you, Ms. Poindexter. This isn't for everybody else. This is Ms. David's.
This was strictly for me. I'm sorry, and I just want to make that clear. I do not expect anyone else. I'm doing this for me and my family because I respect our culture, and I cannot refuse a gift. Right. I was taught that. So please.
And just a point of information or caution, and I just hope that people bearing the gifts are doing it with their sincere heart, that it is something that they themselves would partake of, because I don't want to see anything happen, because if somebody's not bearing a gift that is sincerely good for them as well. So I'm just concerned.
Mahalo, Ms. Poindexter. I leave that to Akua and my ancestors. Mahalo for allowing me this time to do this. And I take this with all seriousness. And it's not a laughing matter. And I'm not doing this to be for anything except with deepest respect. So, mahalo.
Mahalo, Ms. David. Mr. Ilagan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to say thank you, everyone, for testifying. I know this is an issue that I bet most people don't want to even put up on the council floor. After listening to everyone, I have an amendment. And what the amendment is really a neutral platform. And it bears the intention that I originally had. Now, to give you an example of what a resolution or an understanding of what it's all about, you have the whereases where you try to back your facts. But
if we're going to discuss
Wait.
the amendment-
Was that a point of order?
Yes. If
We haven't gotten to the amendment. We're going to have to read it in if there is ever.
okay, so he's
Mr.
discussing
Ilagan has
the-
the floor. Yeah, he's discussing the bill.
Okay, he just said he was discussing the amendment.
No, he's discussing why there was going to be an amendment.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, Mr. Ilagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Willie, I'm trying to address the testimony. I understand the bill or the resolution as of its current form is not going to fly. Simple as that. And I want to make sure that my intention is clear to everyone that the resolution that I want to bring up, which is currently going through the process of the amendment coming forth. So what I've done is striked out all the whereases. And the only whereas on there is the council submits this resolution in response to the planning director's invitation to submit amendments to the general plan.
Mr. Ilagan, I do want to caution before we start talking about the amendment that we are going to have to read in the amendment.
Okay. So I'm going to have to wait until my staff goes through the process to have that amendment. But what I've understand is the be it resolved was my main clear intention. And I've actually changed, if we go to the original bill, keep in mind, I'm grateful that the testimonies were said because it added, I have 5 be resolved that I'm putting up. And I know I can't talk about the amendment, so I can't reveal the other 2 as of right now. But as you know, were mentioned in the testimony. But what I've realized with number 1 is that's gonna stay the same because anything that we do, and the reason why I put it up there is accountability. We need some sort of accountability for geothermal development. And we are subject under state law. The County of Hawaii was created because of the state legislature. Now, our current County Planning Commission should have that authority to regulate future geothermal development. And I stand by that. And I also stand by advocating for renewable energy, whether they're water, solar, even a controversial energy such as geothermal. If done right, I am an advocate for geothermal. Number 2, additional development of geothermal resources should mitigate impacts to people by the use of best available control technology. And that's staying the same. Number 3, I got the amendment. If I may, move to amend Resolution 249 with the contents of Communication 417.3.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Iligan, seconded by Mr. Onishi to amend Resolution 249 with the contents of Communication number 417.3. Mr. Iligan, you may go right ahead.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
my time's about to expire.
You have a new time, actually.
Okay. I'll be with the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the leeway. So currently, what the council has in front of them is all the whereases struck down. And the only whereas is the council submits the resolution in response to the plan director's invitation to submit amendments to the general plan. And if the public is not aware of what the general plan is, because I was not aware in the beginning, the general plan is really looking into the future of Hawaii County, what our plan is on any type of development. So I wanted to make sure that when they go through any sort of development in Hawaii County, that they look into geothermal. And the where be it resolved means this is the actions that the general plan process should take into consideration. And that's what I wanted to point out and highlight. So without all the whereas, there's 5 be it resolved. Now I mentioned the first 2, and the first 2 is still the same. The third one I've changed and struck out urban areas zoned for residential use and changed it to inhabited areas. That encompasses every zoning that you can think of where there's inhabited areas. So additional development of geothermal resources that are not part of the previously approved geothermal resource permit 2 production facilities should, to the extent possible, avoid inhabited areas. That takes into consideration agriculture that I've heard. And the only reason why I didn't put agriculture in there was because it was state law that exempted and allowed it to be a permitted use in for geothermal. That's why it's in agriculture zones. So I couldn't really do anything in that matter, county-wise. State-wise, you can change that. So that's why I didn't put agriculture, due to the fact that we knew we couldn't do anything. But to make it clear, I put inhabited areas. Now the 4 and 5 gave birth because of your testimonies. And what they are is 4, enhanced monitoring measures should continue to be conducted. And I want to say enhanced monitoring has already been happening for the past years. Civil defense have been taking on active role in that. And we bought more monitors for the community and also our departments. So I just want to let you know that's happening. The 5th one is health impact studies should continue to be conducted, and the recommendations from those studies should be implemented. And that's the 5th, be it resolved. So these 5 things are what's going to be taken in consideration when we go through the planning process. This planning process is a very lengthy process, and I just want to bring up the director of planning and once again just give an overview of the outline of the general plan and what how this process works. Director Kanuha?
I know he was here earlier. He's actually in Kona. Yeah, but I think he went up to his office. I don't know if he's here right now, but if you would like, we could hold off questioning Director Kanua.
Is there anyone currently in Kona or Hilo that is able to go through the general plan timeline, just to give the public an understanding of the purpose of even introducing a council amendment regarding geothermal.
I don't see anybody currently here. From the administration.
At this time, I'll just quickly state that this council amendment will, during the, I want to say 3-4 years of planning, will put geothermal in the front of their minds and take into consideration these 5 be it resolved. And I wish I could have the director explain in detail how the length of this process, but at least you kind of understand a little bit. But I don't want to give any false time, and I want to make sure that it's coming out from the director's statement. So at this time, I yield, and I'm here for any questions on this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Ligon. Ms. Yoff.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank everybody who came here to testify today. I was once on the other side of this table, and I was a community grassroots activist standing up for better land use practices in the state of Hawaii. Some of those led to landmark Supreme Court decisions that actually implemented new laws in the state of Hawaii. And I was working probably for 25, 30 years to protect our natural and cultural resources, the rights of Native Hawaiians, and the protection of our public trust resources. So I know how you feel, and I know what it takes to come out and speak to us, and how hard it is for most people to do that. So I just wanted to recognize you for your efforts. And it is really good to see a new generation of warriors who are willing to stand up. So with that said, I just need to clear up something that I think may be a little bit misunderstood by some people here today, and that is that this body, our council, had no opportunity to weigh in on the geothermal resource permit that was issued for Hualalai. So we have not had any say-so on that, and part of that is because Act 97 was repealed in 2012, I believe. And that took away some of the county's powers and authorities regarding geothermal development. The other thing is that the previous council in 2013, of which some of us were on that council, we unanimously adopted a resolution that was brought before us to try and repeal Act 97 at the state level. But that was rejected at the state legislature. So we're kind of back to where we were. And I, for one, would be willing to bring another council resolution to ask the state legislature to consider repealing Act 97, because our county does need to have, and we're the ground level of government, we need to have say-so over land use policies in our county. So regarding Mr. Ligon's amendment, I think he did a good thing. I think he got more to the point of what I hope he was intending to do, and he didn't need to have all the whereas statements in this particular reso. This isn't like a law. This is a recommendation to the planning director that during the next few years, while they're reviewing our general plan, which has to do with a multitude of any kind of decisions that affect structural development of the island, that they will consider looking at what I believe would help address impacts of geothermal development. If we have further development of geothermal, which I, for one, agree with most of the people here, I think we should look at solar seriously rather than any more geothermal plants on an island such as this. So I will be against geothermal development on this side of the island, but in the meantime, I think this is a precautionary type principle that he's trying to address here. And it isn't a done deal with what he's saying. He's just asking the director to consider, I believe he's asking the director to consider these points when they're looking at the general plan revisions. So it doesn't even mean that these statements would become part of the general plan. I'm offering up some recommendations to the director in a resol that's coming up in a little while too. And I don't really expect that my exact language or even that those things will be included. It's just my opportunity to give recommendations to the director as the process unfolds. So, but I do think it was important that we hear from everybody and that Mr. Iligan is trying to be responsive to what he has heard. So with that, I'll yield, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Eoff. Ms. Willie?
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment that was here and have fought with this and brought a resolution back, whatever it was in 2013, about Act 97, and went over to Honolulu and worked on behalf of exactly, basically home rule, that we should have the power and meaningful say-so over what happens on this island. And that's what's being taken away in numerous areas. And I just, in terms of the general plan, I do think it's important what is said. I'm not okay with the way the amendment, and I know you all haven't gotten a chance to look over it, but I'm just going to give one example where it's to avoid areas doing geothermal of inhabited areas. I also don't think it should be any place in conservation areas and our watershed and our buffer areas and our mountains. I mean, here we are, that's to me the future. It's preserving that and those resources. So I just think we have to do a great deal more. I know I contacted a few people in Puna and let them know that I'm going to I have some proposals for the general plan coming up on September 2nd, 9 a.m., and asked, what additional input would be good to put in there on geothermal. I do have, pretty much all sections, different areas, and my focus is really that we should prioritize solar, wind, and pumped hydro. But there is more discussion, and right now, by September 8th, is the opportunity for the council and council members to give the planning director direction. And, it's a 3 and 4 year process. I know I want it to be shorter. I know Councilmember Gregor led, let's have it a longer process. I would like to see us look at what are our goals and our priorities first, and then work on the planning department looking on strategies. So I would just assume that Councilmember Iligan withdrew this motion. I'm not going to support it at this time. And I did appreciate the testimony that we should be coming in here, like what Bob Patrici said, and educating us more. And I'd also like to hear on that the health plan, or that portion that the administration still hasn't released, get a presentation on that and get some discussion going on what we want and not just what we want. So I'm going to just keep it simple at that. I will be voting against this. We do have more to do, and I appreciate you all coming out here. And let's make it so that, we're going to have to really organize on a lot of this and deal with the state as well, and that we have say-so what goes on this island and make it happen. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Willie. Ms. David?
Mahalo, Chair. And I'd like to echo Ms. Eoff's comments about thanking everyone for coming out today and spending the time with us and giving us your feelings. I also want to thank Gregor Ilagan for quickly revising his resolution based on what he has heard this morning, and I commend him for that. What I do want to say is, having been involved with land uses and the things that Ms. Eoff has been speaking of myself for the last 30 years, we have come a long way in public participation, in awareness of the Native Hawaiian issues and how we need to preserve these things because they are totally connected to how we are as a people. So given that, this general plan resolutions, we are being requested as a body to give up suggestions to the planning department on what we feel they should consider in directing the next 10 years. Now, it's the planning director has the option in his review to either take it or leave it. It is totally up to him, but within that process, they will have numerous public hearings again, and before it comes back to the council for our final review. So there is a process, there is a lengthy process, one that engages the community. And I think that's the opportunity for everyone. If you don't agree with the proposals being submitted to the general plan, that is our opportunity to weigh in. And then when it comes to council again, you have another opportunity. So there's a lot of checks and balances as far as transparency and openness in government that I'm very happy to see, because it was not like this 30 years ago when we started the fight. So in all deference to Mr. Ilagan, and for anyone else that brings a resolution intending to make suggestions to the planning department of what they feel should be considered, I would like to see everybody's resolutions go forward with that in mind. Not that we support geothermal or not. For me, it will not happen on Hualalai. But for this, in this situation, I think we all deserve the opportunity to get our thoughts and our, as legislators, brought before another body for consideration. And there's a separate process for that, another check and balance. So I really would like to support everybody's resolution, not based on whether I agree with geothermal or not, but procedure and the opportunity to be fair to everyone. And I'd like to see, if I bring something controversial, I'd like to see it go through the process. If it dies, it dies. But I had the opportunity to put it forward, and I think everybody deserves that. So for me, I'd love to see Ms. Willie's version of a resolution also, but I don't want to see hers in place of Mr. Ilagan's, because I really think everybody's ideas should be vetted the same way. And I'm not voting for or against geothermal. This is not why we're here today. I'm voting because we're being asked to submit suggestions. And that is basically what my position is going to be. When the time comes, I will take a firm position against geothermal. But this is not the day. We're not discussing Hualalai today. And this is a general plan submission that we are requested by law to submit, and we're taking that opportunity. So I hope you understand that it is not a position on geothermal, and you understand why I will be voting for everyone's resolution, because that's the fair process. So mahalo, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. David. Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah, I just want to ditto what Councilmember Eoff and Councilmember David said. And I definitely support your statements wholeheartedly. So I just want to say I ditto them. Thank you.
Mr. Paleko, are you ready? Did you? Okay. Council members, anybody else on the first round? On the first round, Mr. Chung.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad my colleagues like Ms. David so eloquently just explained the process that we're going through right now. And hopefully those persons who came to testify today understand that this is not some insidious plot by Mr. Iligan. It's just a process that we go through. But what I felt was instructive today was, all of the testimony that came out. In particular, I heard some things from a Mr. Castle. I thought that was really relevant and helpful. Also, Mr. Kuykendall out in Pahoa, Miss Evans, I don't know if she's still here, and then of course Mr. Patrici and Mr. Travis out in Hilo. And in response to that is what Mr. Iligan has now presented to us in the way of an amendment. There's one thing, though. I looked at this, number 5. He added this: health impact studies should continue to be conducted, and the recommendations from those studies should be implemented. Now, I'm not in a position to amend anything like that, but if I could make a suggestion, based on what I heard today, if it could read, health impact studies should continue to be conducted, and the findings and recommendations from those studies should be made available to the public and implemented. I mean, and I'm just kind of following up on some of the concerns that I heard this morning. I think it would make it a better amendment. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. Mr. Iligan. Sorry, it took me a while to think of who else calling next.
It's all right. I wasn't sure which hand I was actually lifting for a second. I'm just playing. I'll make those amendments right now. Maybe if we could table this, or unless we could do a friendly amendment. What do you prefer, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Clerk, what any recommendations?
It's permissible to make a verbal amendment to a written amendment, provided it, this one we can. It's not that complicated. We just basically would read it back in so it's clear what the motion is. So if you would like to, I think that would be okay to do that without rewriting it and resubmitting it.
So it'd be a friendly amendment done verbally.
Yes, essentially, Mr. Erlan would make a motion to amend his amendment.
So the amendment that I've heard is the health impact studies should continue to be conducted and findings made available to the public, conducted and findings and recommendations made available to the public, and from those studies should be implemented.
Here, I got it. Health impact studies should continue to be conducted, and the findings and recommendations from those studies should be made available for the public and be implemented. I think that's what I wrote down. Made available to the public.
Okay.
And shall be, right? Should be, shall be.
I agree.
I didn't hear a second to the motion to amend.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to amend Communication 417.3 with the verbal amendment made by Mr. Iligan, previously stated. And who was it seconded by? Ms. Poindexter. And let me, for the public's benefit again, that verbal amendment, friendly amendment, I should say, was that the health impact studies should continue to be conducted and the findings and recommendations from those studies be made available for the public and be implemented. Is that what I got?
Was there a... Never mind. Okay.
Health impact studies should continue to be conducted, and the findings and recommendations from those studies be made available for the public and be implemented. Yes. Okay, and it was seconded by Ms. Poindexter. Council members, you got that? Mr. Clerk, we'll have any discussion upon that amendment? Any discussion? We can vote on this friendly amendment, yeah? Or okay, all in favor of this friendly amendment to number 5 of Communication 417.3, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 9 ayes, motion passes. So now we're back to Communication 417.3 as amended. Discussion. Mr. Lagan.
Actually, I'll go last.
Okay. Ms. Wheeling?
Although I don't agree with all what's in there, I would like to offer some, see if the sponsor would agree to a couple other changes. And I actually made them amending the first draft of the bill, but I'll go through it. I'm not opposed to passing this on to the planning director as that, although I don't agree with it fully, to the planning director for further consideration. But I would, for example, in what you have as number 3 currently, where it says additional development of geothermal resources are not part of the previously approved geothermal resource permit to production facilities, should, to the extent possible, avoid, and now it has inhabited areas. And I'll just tell you, and if you were to, I'm doing this as discussion because I'm not submitting this, my Communication 417.1 as an amendment, but I'm reading from it. If on that one, on number 3, we were to say additional development of geothermal resources shall avoid urban areas zoned for or inhabited, and those lands designated by the State Land Use Commission as being within conservation district. So what I'm asking is to protect the conservation district, in other words, the top of the mountain and the buffer areas, and say shall. And I'm also not sure that we need to exclude the part of the previously approved geothermal resource permit, but just shall avoid urban areas zoned for residential uses or inhabited areas, and those lands designated by the State Land Use Commission as being within the conservation district. I'm just going to mention my other one, and then I'll do whatever or give the language to in writing to Gregor to look at. The other one, and actually I went in the wrong order, but on number 2, he has additional development of geothermal resources should mitigate impacts to people by the use of best available control technology. What I have is additional development of geothermal resources shall, rather than should, avoid, reduce, mitigate adverse impacts to affected populations by the use of best available control technologies to the maximum extent possible. So I stayed with what Gregor has, but just trying to make it, taking some of the shoulds to shalls, and including the conservation district. So I know mine aren't so easy to do verbally, and I think that they're friendly. I'm doing them would be as friendly amendment, but what do you want me to do?
Thank you, Ms. Willie. It's
Shall I give it to Gregor to read and see if he thinks that they're friendly?
I think after the meeting you should give it to Gregor, but I think if we move on towards these friendly amendments, it gets very difficult with regards to parliamentary procedure and how we proceed with this specific resolution. So I think we're going down a dangerous path, a slippery slope a little bit, but I think your recommendations are noted. And then
Okay,
we
I'm
can-
comfortable with that.
and the planning director is also here listening to
Right.
all of our
And he'll
conversation.
get, yeah. Let me just ask, though, yeah, because my communication 417.1 is seeking to amend the bill, not his amended version. Anyway, I think you understand where I'm going. And I do think that it's not just inhabited areas, it's the mountaintop and the conservation areas, and that we need to look at. And I think that someone said, a 5-mile radius. I mean, I think there was a lot of testimony today that was important if we are going to go ahead with geothermal. So I'm going to yield, and I will just allow, this is Gregor's ideas going forward, and I think the planning director will know where I'm coming from a different angle.
Thank you, Ms. Willie. And again, these are just recommendations to the planning director. Okay, moving on the amendment. Before Mr. Iligan goes again, we do have the planning director here if anybody wants to question. But Mr. Iligan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My final comment is actually, if I could bring up the Director for Planning, Mr. Kanuha. All it is informational on the general plan process. If you can describe what the process is to the public. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dwayne Kanua, Planning Director. What was the question again?
Could you explain the stages of the general plan so the public could understand the time frame and the timeline?
Okay. Well, actually, the sequence of the process was articulated quite clearly by Councilperson David. Okay, that's exactly where we are. We're in the process of information gathering and validation of things at this point in time. And that's why the process allows for the council as the policy body to come forth with their policy recommendations way up front at the beginning, right? So in the way the general plan comprehensive review process is set up, that gives us an opportunity to give the most weight to the policy direction of the policymakers of the county. And that's the purpose for these, for giving the council the opportunity to provide us with their recommendations through resolution. Okay. Then what will happen is that there's a number of ongoing processes that are happening, but at some point in time, and I think it'll probably be around this time next year, when the initial recommendations will start to come out through public forums, public meetings, workshops, community events, so on and so forth. So whatever products come out of that then go to the respective county planning commissions, okay, for their review, recommendation up to the council. After they get through their process, then it comes to the council for their action. So tentatively, we're looking at this process getting to you sometime in 2017, I guess, maybe mid-2017. That's how far ahead we have to program it, because it's a, it's a big project. It's a once in a, 10 or 15 year horizon that you get a chance to do it. And as we all know, there's so much that happens over a 10-year period. Okay, that has to be assimilated, put together, weighed against what was envisioned 10 years before, and then come up with recommendations to the council for the amendment of the general plan.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Iligan. Any other questions? Oh, Ms. Yoff.
I have a question, Mr. Director Kanuha.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure how long your question is going to take, but we do have to change tapes. So if we could just ask for a recess, we have like a minute left on the tape, and I'm thinking it's going to take longer than a minute.
Thank you, Ms. Yoff. Real quickly, we'll take a brief recess.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being patient. We're coming out of recess. Ms. Eoff, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Director Kanuha. There's a little bit of discussion that Ms. Willie had with us just a little bit ago, and I tend to agree with her that geothermal development is a very industrialized type of a land use, and it really isn't appropriate in conservation lands either. And in this particular suggestion for you, Mr. Iligan has only stated inhabited areas. And right now it's a little bit difficult to do any more amending as far as friendly amendments to this. I just wondered, what would be your suggestion? Would it be for Ms. Willie or somebody else to bring you another suggestion that includes more language for you to also consider? Because as Ms. David stated, I didn't know whether it's really appropriate for us to completely, revamp what Mr. Iligan is asking to be considered. But if we have other things to be considered, shall we do it, or should we do it in our own way, either via resolution or comments to the director?
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the language in item 1?
Actually, item 3.
Item 2.
Well, I don't know if you have the current, you probably don't have his amendment. Do you have communication 417.3?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, item 3. He's stating that additional development of geothermal resources should, to the extent possible, avoid inhabited areas. And as Ms. Willie said, it may also be an important statement for some people to give to you that it should also avoid areas that are in the conservation district. Is that correct, Ms. Willie? Yes. Yeah. So I'm just wondering.
Conservation district as established by the state land use.
By the state land use. So is the vehicle to bring that comment forward through a separate either memo to you or resolution?
Actually, the way the wording is, kind of gets rather specific. But the way I would assess this language is that all of them, actually from items 2 on down, okay, would all tend to fall under what happens as a result of item 1, okay, which is, and again, the language there is I think the appropriate language, which is subject to the requirements of state law, because right now state law allows geothermal in all of the zones.
Right, and that's what I had stated previously, that until we can repeal Act 97 and bring some kind of home rule policies back to the county government, planning commission, what county council, we are subject to this current state law.
Correct. That's why what I just stated is that the additional recommendations 2, 3, 4, and 5, the way I would read them is they would be subject to what happens under 1.
I see.
So, in my opinion, they're not mutually exclusive. In other words, they're not. I don't see where they need to be put off the table until 1 is determined.
Excuse me.
you would think that they're not even relevant?
No,
Or they're-
I just said I think they're relevant subject to what happens with item 1. Okay, so from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with considering them, because if item 1 happens to come forward, in other words, if the state law is amended and the county, through the planning commission or the council or whoever, gets the control over the authority of regulation, then at least you'll have the rest of these components already in place. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
With regard to number 3, whether it has to get as specific in terms of the districts, again, what happens in item 1 will control that.
Mm.
And then in the general plan itself, as it sits right now, as it's adopted right now, there's specific policies with regard to geothermal already in there, yes. So,
Okay. Well, I still believe the work has to be done at the state level.
correct. That's what I'm saying. But because the proposals for consideration fall under that, right? The language is subject to state law and subject to the planning commission or the county getting control, the authority to regulate geothermal. Okay. So I don't see any, I don't see any prejudice in considering all of the items under there at the same time. At the same time, when we look at this.
And if other items are brought forward by other council members, that would be something to consider as well.
Yeah.
If
So, basically I'm saying I don't have a problem with considering everything you have in this amended resolution.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Poindexter.
So I have a question on who's submitting suggestions. I know the council is able to, and don't the CDPs, the Community Action Committees, also chime in?
Yes, the CDPs have been coming in with
Right. So that's where I think it's real
recommendations.
important, and I know I've been talking, I'm not bringing resolutions forward because I'm working with our Hamakua Community Development Plan and that committee, and we're going to use that to
That
come
forum.
forward with your resolution. So I would like to say for the Kona people, make sure you're involved with the action committee, because they are the ones that are your driving force to hold our feet to the fire when it comes law, because the community development plans is an ordinance and it is law, so it dictates, or I would say, we have to make sure that we're following what the community development is guiding us to. Like in Hamakua, certain areas you cannot do certain kinds of development. Ours is not adopted yet, but the Kona Community Development Plan is adopted, but there's still changes through community input. So I would recommend that you definitely contact the people on the action committee for Kona to make sure that your voices are heard there as well. So thank you for that, because I'm working through my CDP committee.
And again, they're not the only venue. Community organizations, special interest groups. The spectrum is, across the board for input.
Thank you.
And of course, it will help if across the board that the input is consistent on a certain issue. That gives us and that gives you, I think, a true sentiment of where the community stands on certain issues. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other discussion, council members, on the motion to amend as amended? Okay, Mr. Clerk, roll call.
Mr. Chung, Ms. David,
Aye.
Ms. Eoff, Mr. Iligan,
Aye.
Mr. Onishi, Mr. Paleka, Ms. Poindexter,
Aye.
Ms. Willie, Chair Kanua.
Aye.
Chair Kanua, you have 9 ayes.
Thank you very much. So, council members, we're on the main motion as amended, but pursuant to rule number 24, bills and resolutions, we have to hold this over to the next council meeting.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Ms. Willie, move to suspend rule number 24 so that we can vote on this today.
Yes.
It's been moved by Ms. Willie, seconded by Ms. Poindexter. There's no discussion on this, the motion to suspend, so roll call.
Mr. Chung, Ms. David,
Aye.
Ms. Eoff, Mr. Ligon,
Aye.
Mr. Onishi, Mr. Paleka, Ms. Poindexter,
Aye.
Ms. Willie.
Aye. Oh, is that me?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. You have 9 ayes. You have 9 ayes.
Thank you. So now on the main motion as amended, we can vote on this today. Is there any other discussion? Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Okay. To adopt Resolution 249 as amended, Mr. Chung, Ms. David,
Aye.
Ms. Eoff, Mr. Ligon,
Aye.
Mr. Onishi, Mr. Paleka, Ms. Poindexter,
Aye.
Ms. Willie,
Aye.
Chair Kanua.
Aye.
Chair Kanua, you have 9 ayes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes. Okay, Mr. Clerk, council members, it's 12:50. What do you guys want to do?